Before beginning Lesson 1.6, apply an advanced filter with function-driven criteria, I need to take a little diversion to introduce the int, mod and exact functions. We'll be using these functions in the lesson, and I'd like to explain how they work first. First of all, the int or integer function. The int function returns a whole number from a number that has decimal places. For example, 5.25 would return an integer of 5, and 10.789 will return an integer of 10. Let's see that in action now. I click in cell B4, I type equals int, open brackets, there's the number, close the brackets, and I press the enter key. And the answer is 5. If I now autofill this number down to the next row, we should see the value 10. And indeed we do. Next I want to talk about the mod function, also called the modulus or remainder function. The mod function returns the remainder when a number has a divisor applied to it. For example, the number 7 with a divisor of 5 would have a mod of 2, because 7 divided by 5 is 1 with 2 over. And 13 divided by 5 would have a remainder of 3, because 5 goes into 13 twice with 3 over. Let's see it in action now. So in cell B8 I type equals mod and open brackets, and you can see that there are two arguments for the modulus function, the number and the divisor. Well, the number is going to be the 7, that's in cell A8, and the divisor is going to be 5. And I expect this to return the value 2, being the remainder of 7 divided by 5. I press the enter key, and the mod function didn't let me down. And if I autofill cell B8 to B9, I should see a remainder of 3. That's great. Let's now look at a practical application of the integer and modulus function in converting minutes into hours and minutes. And you can use the same technique to convert inches into feet and inches, or feet into yards, and so on. Let's start by typing an arbitrary number into cell E8. We'll have 156 minutes. Now you know that 156 minutes is 2 hours and 36 minutes, because 60 goes into 156 twice, leaving a remainder of 36. We can use the integer function to work out the number of hours in 156 minutes, simply by typing equals int, open brackets, there's the 156 minutes, divided by 60. And that will equate to 2 point something, but we're only interested in the 2 part of it, the number of hours in 156 minutes. When I press the enter key, I get the result 2. To work out the number of minutes in 156 minutes, we can use the mod function by dividing 156 by 60 and returning the remainder. Here's how it's done. Equals mod, open brackets, there's the number of minutes, divide it by 60, and the answer should be 36. I press the enter key, and the answer is 36 minutes. And whatever number of minutes I now type into cell E8, I'm going to get the answer in hours and minutes in cell E9 and E10. The final function I want to introduce to you is the exact function. The exact function compares two strings, such as the word seafood in A13 and the word seafood in uppercase in cell B13. The function returns true if the two strings are identical and false if they're not. And because the value in B13 isn't identical to the value in A13, it will return false. However, in the case of the condiments values in cells A14 and B14, the exact function should return true, because both strings are exactly the same. Let's test it out. I type equals exact, open brackets, there's the first text string, comma, there's the second text string, close the brackets, and press the enter key. And indeed, I get false. If I now autofill cell C13 to cell C14, I expect to see true in the case of the two condiment strings. Let's try. And yes, it returns true. Now I've introduced the int, mod, and exact functions, we can get on with the lesson and apply an advanced filter with function-driven criteria. For this lesson, you need to open the sample file inventory3 from your sample files folder. And I'll begin this lesson by deleting any criteria that currently appear in the Advanced Filters criteria range. When a company conducts a physical stock check of its inventory, there will always be some errors in the count. Auditors have to verify the accuracy of a stock check, and to do this, they extract some random samples in order to establish the likely margin of error. In this lesson, we're going to use the mod function in conjunction with an advanced filter to show one transaction in every 5, so that we can sample 1 in 5, or 20%, of the products to check during the audit. I'll begin this lesson by inserting a new column to the left of column A, and I'll give that the heading Number, and then I'll use the Format Painter to match the formatting to that in cell B6. I want sequential numbers in this column, and the easiest way to do that is to type 1 in the first cell, and then equals, and then refer to the first cell and add 1 to it to get 2, then select A8 and double-click the autofill handle. And this will put sequential numbers into every cell of the range. Now I need to create a mod function in cell A2 that will return true if the number in column A is equally divisible by 5, and false if it isn't. Let's begin by typing equals mod, open brackets, then I refer to the first cell in column A, then comma, and the divisor will be 5, and I close the bracket. Now let's think of what this will return. In the case of cell A7, it will return 1, because 1 doesn't divide by 5, so there's a remainder of 1. And in cell A8 it will be 2, A9 3, A10 4, but when we get to cell A11, the number 5 divides perfectly by 5 with no remainder, so the result will be 0. And it will be the same in cell A16, because 10 divided by 5 also has no remainder. So in every case where the remainder is 0, I want this function to return true. So if I type equals 0, every time I find a number divisible by 5 in column A, I'll return true, and every time there's a remainder, it will return false. So in the case of cell A7, 1 equals 0 is clearly false, but in the case of cell A11, 0 equals 0 is true. So when I press the Enter key, I'll expect to see false, because I'm referencing cell A7. I press Enter, and I get the value false in the cell. Let's now apply the advanced filter using this function-driven criteria to see whether we can filter down to every row that has a number that equally divides by 5. So I click Data on the ribbon, and in the Sort and Filter group, Advanced, to bring up the Advanced Filter dialog. And notice that the Advanced Filter hasn't done its job as well as usual, because it's finding the list range B6 to G75. And this should, of course, be A6 to G75. So I think I'll just change that manually from B to A. And for the criteria range, I'm showing B1 to G4. I'm going to change that to the criteria A1 to A2. Now, it's a strange quirk of the advanced filter, when used with functions, that the cell above the function must be blank. And for that reason, I can't put any value in cell A1. If you did that, the advanced filter simply wouldn't work. I now click the OK button, and you can see that the advanced filter's done exactly what I wanted it to. The only rows shown in the range are now those that have a number that's perfectly divisible by 5. Let's now remove the advanced filter by clicking anywhere in the range, and then Data tab on the ribbon, Sort and Filter, and Clear. And now let's look at another use of a function-driven criteria with an advanced filter. And that is to implement a case-sensitive filter. Whenever seafood is displayed in the category column, it's always in mixed case. But supposing there was an uppercase version of seafood, and you wanted to filter to only those instances of seafood that were in uppercase. The only way to do this is using a function-driven criteria that uses the exact function. Let's see that in action. I click in cell D2 and type equals exact, open brackets. I first refer to the cell D7 and then compare it in an exact way with the text seafood. Notice the quotation marks that are needed whenever literal text is quoted in a function. I then close the bracket, and in the case of cell D7, this will return false, of course, because condiments isn't exactly equal to uppercase seafood. And in the case of cell D8, I'll still return false, because seafood in mixed case isn't exactly the same as seafood in uppercase. But in the case of cell D10, I will return true, because seafood in uppercase will be exactly equal to the second argument, seafood in uppercase. So I'll press the Enter key, and I'll delete the text category from cell D1, because remember that strange quirk when using function-driven criteria with advanced filters. The cell above the function-driven criteria must always be blank. I'll now click into the range, and then Data on the ribbon, Sort and Filter, and Advanced Filter. And you can see that the Advanced Filter has correctly identified the list range of A6 to G75, and in the case of the criteria range, I'm going to apply D1 to D2. That's the new function we've just added. When I click OK, I expect only one result to remain in the range, and that is uppercase seafood. I click OK, and Excel hasn't let me down. It's filtered down to the only row that has seafood in uppercase in the category column. Let's now remove the filter by clicking Data tab on the ribbon, Sort and Filter, and Clear. And I'll just tidy things up again by taking the text in cell D6 and copying it to cell D1. All that remains now is to save your work, and I'm going to save with the new name Inventory 4, and as usual, I'll save to the folder above my Sample Files folder. I click the Save button, and you've now completed Lesson 1.6, Apply an Advanced Filter with Function-Driven Criteria.